Hello guys, it's Tinzen from Offset Robotics, and today I'm going to be walking everyone through an assembly guide for the following box slide kit, as you can see. So let's get started. For this assembly, you're going to need a few tools. You're going to need a 2mm Allen key, 2.5mm Allen key, and a 5.5mm hex driver. Alternatively, you can always use pliers, but not recommended. And a hammer, or if you have access to one, a press of sorts. We're going to need wire cutters for string. To make your life easier, a file will also come in handy at some points. So let's start with what you're going to find in one kit. We're going to get a few bags as shown, and these are going to be plates, fasteners, dowel pins and bearings, nuts, 3D printed parts, utility bag, and bearings and bearing shields. And of course, the actual tubes. So we have what we're going to call today our outer stage, our middle stage, and our final stage, which is the smallest. All right, so first we're going to take our final tube, and we're going to assemble the final insert that's going to go on the bottom. This insert's going to ride in the middle of the middle stage tube. So for this, we're going to need a few things from all of our bags. We're going to need this set of plates, so the super small tiny ones. We're going to need the only two M4 screws that come in the kit. We're going to need 4x9x4 bearings and 10mm dowel pins. We're going to need two M4 hex nuts, this printed part, and some 4x9x4 bearings. So to get started, we're going to take our plates and see how there's a channel here. This is going to fit the bearing and dowel pin assembly as shown here, like that. So to start, what we're going to do is we're going to take our M4 screws, slot them through like this, slot two bearings on as shown, followed by our 3D printed part. Just be gentle with this part. Followed by two more bearings, and then the outer plate as shown. The tolerances for the holes should be quite tight, so if it's slightly hard to get on, then use some help from your Allen key. And lastly, we're going to attach our M4 hex nuts. And as you can see, this is our insert nearly done. This should fit into the bottom of our final tube, and it should easily slot in like this. As you can see, the holes are slightly misaligned. This is in fact by design, as we're going to be threading the 3D printed part inside in order to hold this insert in, and also thread the aluminium plate a little bit. These are the dowel pin and bearing assemblies we're going to be making for this last stage. In your utility bag here, you're going to find a piece like this. This is used to turn your 4x9x4 bearing and 10mm dowel pin into this, ensuring that the bearing is perfectly centered on the dowel pin. So first we're going to take our bearing, press it into this printed part, take our dowel pin and line it up as such. For this step, as well as all of the other steps involving bearings and dowel pins, I would highly recommend using a press, a rack and pinion press or something of sorts to insert the dowel pins into the bearings. However, if you don't have a press, a hammer will be just fine. Just be very careful to make sure the dowel pin is aligned to the bearing, otherwise you could damage the bearing. We're going to use this part, put our dowel pin in, and slowly tap. As you can see here, we've banged until the dowel pin is flush with the bottom of your surface. And lastly, try and take the bearing insert out. If in doubt, you can give it the eye test and make sure that your bearing is perfectly in the middle, centered on your dowel pin. Again, please be careful not to damage the bearings during the step. The best way to do that is to use a press or ensure that your dowel pin is perfectly lined up when you're pressing it in. If your holes don't align like this, or they're slightly misaligned, what I would recommend doing is using a file to slowly deburr or take off material from this edge, as there may be burrs on this edge that is stopping your insert from going all the way in. Once we've done that, we're going to take two 20mm screws from our fastener kit, and we're going to screw them in to the insert. Now, keep in mind that during this step, you will be threading the 3D printed insert, so there will be a little bit of resistance when you're screwing, but it should not be too much, as you can see here. There'll be a little bit more resistance as the screw is coming out the other side. That's okay. Perfect. As you'll see, we've slightly threaded the tube, which means that this insert is very, very securely in place. Since we screwed in this side, we're actually going to flip the tube around and screw from the other diagonal. And again, just a little bit of resistance during the end. And as you can see, we've got our final insert attached to the tube securely. It's not going to go anywhere. This step shouldn't be too difficult. If the screws aren't going in, even with a lot of effort, then try and file down these plates or use a drill to help you clear some material. If you're going to use a drill to clear some material, then make sure to leave enough material so that we can still thread it, ensuring a secure connection. We're going to do the exact same thing, just for the middle tube now. We're going to need from our printed bag, these parts, 4 more of the 4x9x4 bearings, and 4 of these 6x10x3mm bearings here. Firstly, what we're going to do is take these inserts and slot on the 10mm outer diameter bearings. They should slot on with perfect tolerance, if you can hear. And what we're going to do is slot this into the sleeves on this part. They should also snap right in. Just like this. Now we're going to work on the side bearing assemblies. So reach into our dowel pin bag again and take out the next 2 shortest dowel pins. These are 16mm dowel pins. This time is a lot easier than before. What we're going to do is put a bearing on either side of a dowel pin. So again, I would recommend doing this with a press, but if you don't have a press, a hammer works fine. We're going to put our dowel pin into the bearing like this, ensure that it's straight, give it a few taps with the hammer until the dowel pin is flush with the bearing as shown. We're going to flip it around and do the same thing for the other side, ensuring that our bearing is straight. Not quite in. And it's flush. Again, be very careful during this step not to damage the bearings and ensure that the dowel pin is aligned straight. Not much force should be needed with the hammer to press the bearings into the dowel pin. And repeating it for the other bearing assembly. Perfect. And we should have 2 side bearing assemblies like this. Next, we're going to take these 2 aluminium plates from our plates bag and press the side bearing assemblies into the channels as shown here, and ensure that there's no friction on the bearings. If there is any friction, then we need to check that the distance is correct and that the bearing is flush with the dowel pin. But there's none here, so let's continue. We're going to next go to our utilities bag and take out a few of these infamous zip ties and attach the side bearings to these plates as shown. Lastly, we're going to need some 30mm screws. Next, we're going to attach these two side plates to our main 3D printer part. When you do this, ensure that the side bearings are sticking out. And we're going to take two M3 lock nuts and attach them to ensure everything stays together. Quick note about this: how much you tension these screws will slightly impact the distance between the two outsides of these side bearings, which will impact the force that it's applying to the outer walls. So the more you tighten these screws, the less friction your bottom insert will have. However, there might be some play in the bottom insert. It comes pre-tuned out of the box to have good tolerances straight away, but make sure you're always experimenting and trying to find an optimal balance between friction and rigidity of these side bearings, which we'll see later. Next, we can take our tube and, same as before, into the bottom like this. You might need to do some hammering or pressing as such until these holes line up. And there we go. Same thing as before, it's designed to be tight to ensure that it has great grip. We're going to slightly thread the 3D printed insert and the aluminium. Now, as you can see, the holes don't have to be perfect. That's okay. But if they are slightly misaligned, go back and see if there's any burrs, or use a drill to help you out. But make sure you still leave yourself enough 3D printed material to thread in this next step. Here, we're going to take our last two 30mm M3 nuts and we're going to push them into the 3D print, which is going to secure our insert to the middle tube. Again, there should be a little bit of resistance here, so we're going to need to use our Allen key to help us out. And again, a little bit of friction when it's going from the other side. And as you can see, we should be all the way flush through on this side. Now, same thing with the other side. And now our middle insert should be securely attached to the tube. Once that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to take our final insert, make sure we've got those two dowel pins from before, put these dowel pins into the channels as shown, and we're going to insert our final tube into our middle tube stage. Now, take note that the side bearings run along this pocketed edge of the tube, like this. And that should go in smoothly. Now that we've done that, we're going to make the top insert for the middle stage. From a bearing bag, we're going to need 4 of these main bearings. These bearings are 6 by 12 by 4. And we're going to need a V bearing and a bearing shield. 4 more of these small 4 by 9 by 4 bearings. The next size up dowel pins, which these are 20 mil. And the following printed parts. Now in your printed parts box, there's a lot of printed parts that look similar. Notice the distinction between these two parts. Now this part here is used for the middle stage top assembly, which is what we're doing now. This part, save for later. It's going to be for our outer top stage. First things first with the bearings and the dowel pins. Once we've done that, put them into our plates to see there's no friction. There shouldn't be. Happy days. Now we can use a zip tie to secure the side bearings to this plate, same as before. Also another note, these zip ties aren't for any structural purpose, they're just to make assembling a lot easier, which you'll see in a little bit. Next step is to attach these plates to the tube. And to do that, we're going to use this piece. So this piece stores a nut as such. So we're going to grab a jam nut and chuck it in here like this and press it in. It should be a pretty tight fit, as you can see, but that's just to ensure the nuts don't fall out when we're trying to assemble things. Once we put our nuts in, we're going to take this insert and slide it in here. And then we're going to use the final tube and press it up like that. So as you can see, it's a bit off center here, but this final tube is actually lining up our nuts to be in the perfect spot where we want it to be. So as you can see right here. So once we've done that, it's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to take our plate, put it on, take a 6mm screw, and we're going to start screwing as such. And that should all be lined up for us. If you're struggling, like I am here, then try and look on the side to make sure that the screw is engaging properly with the nut. And as you can see, it's bitten into the thread. So we can go ahead and tighten it. Flip it around. Make sure that's all lined up, which it is great. Take out the plate, a screw, and screw it in. So once we've got 2 screws attached, what we're going to do is pop out our final tube and gently squeeze the nut holder together like this and flip it around so we can do the other side. So same thing again, grab 2 more jam nuts and we'll press it into this holder. Like this, squeeze it in there. It's a bit tricky. Try and line it up as best we can and press the tube up, and that should align our nuts, as we can see. There we go. Take another screw and let's do this up and do it up. Same thing for this side. And we're all done. We can now pop this out. Make sure to save this print for later as well, because if a screw ever falls out and you need to get a nut in a tricky to access spot, this is a really easy tool to do that. Oh, oops, I forgot that we're also going to need this part as well. We're going to take this part, put our main bearings on. They should slide on quite well, like that. And take these outside parts and put them on, like that. And this is one of the assemblies here. Once we've made this, we got to put it in here. Now, I find that loosening off these screws a little bit helps a lot with this process. So just loosen off these screws a little bit. Not too much, as you don't want to lose the nut. And slot it in. So in this part of the assembly process, it actually doesn't matter which side we slot this assembly in. Once we've slotted in, try and line up the holes best we can and chuck our 40mm screw. That should slide right through. Perfect. And chuck an M3 lock nut on as shown. And just do it up loosely for now. This is another tricky part of the assembly, which is putting the V-bearing and shims on perfectly. So place a shim on your bearing like this. Take your bearing guide, bearing shield, and try and slot it on as such. And flip it around. And with some luck, we should be able to insert our second shim like this. Now, what I find is a nice trick is to use an Allen key to hold this sort of assembly. So as you can see, it's on the Allen key now and no shims are going to be falling off. And once we've done it once, we can store it here for the rest of the build. Once again, take our bearings and 3D prints and insert them on. Same thing here. And the spacers as well. Now, what I like to do here is actually use the Allen key as an assembly tool. So, as you can see, I'm going to take this off, put this on, put the bearing back on, and put it on like this. So there are little grooves in the 3D printed part, and that is for holding the bearing shield in place, which will be very important when it comes to stringing and making sure that everything stays nice and consistent and reliable. So we're going to take this assembly. Since we've loosened our screws, it should be relatively easy to get on. Pop it in place like that. Take out the Allen key and press into place as such. Same thing again here. We're going to take a 40mm screw from our bag and should be able to insert it through. This one's going to need a little bit more convincing, so it's probably helpful. Oh, this isn't aligned. There we go. That wasn't aligned there, so it should slide much easier now. There we go. And we're going to take an M3 lock nut and just do up this side like this. Same again. Now we're nearly done. So as you can see, we've got our final stage riding smoothly in our middle stage like this. Let's make sure to tighten up these bolts, tighten up these side screws again. As you can see, it's rotating. I can use the other Allen key just to stop the nut rotating so that engages. And there we have it. This is tight now. And now you can see we have our final stage fully encapsulated by our middle stage. And right here, you should be able to give the friction and rigidity a test. So you should have a somewhat smooth stage like this with little friction, and it also should be quite rigid. So even here, there's very little wobble, almost virtually no wobble, and same with the side. Now you can tune the friction and the stability of your slide here. For this is pretty good, but if you want more squeezing force between these two plates, I'd recommend tightening these screws. And what that's gonna do is actually gonna press these side bearings in to the tube, which is gonna apply more force, and it's gonna keep it more rigid, especially at those longer stroke lengths. You shouldn't have to worry too much about these side bearings. They should be fine. As you can see, the friction and rigidity is great here. So we're gonna move on to the outer stage. So now we're gonna take out our outer stage. So what we're gonna do is the exact same as before. We're gonna place our middle tube into the outer stage like this. And that should slide smoothly in. Great. If you see how there's a bit of bounce in here, that means that these screws need to be tightened just a little bit more, since the side bearings are exerting too much pressure outwards. So we'll quickly do that. We shouldn't have to tighten them much for this to be a little bit better. So we'll try that for now. As you can see, it's much better. No bouncing, no snapping. We're gonna go into our utility bag and we're gonna take out this, which is the same thing, but for the outer stage. Notice how we have 2 slots for 2 nuts. To assemble the top insert for the outer stage, we're gonna need our last 2 plates, the last of our screws, and the last of our dowel pins. It looks like a lot of bearings here, but you'll see eventually why there's so many bearings. First things first, let's get to assembling our side bearings. You guys know the drill. Take your dowel pin, take your press or your hammer, give it a few taps, flip it around, give it a few taps, and we should have a great side bearing assembly. There should be no friction, everything should be great. Same thing for the other side. We'll take this. Once again, make sure to take care in having your dowel pin straight with your bearing. And once we've done that, we'll put it in our plate like that, press it in, and test if there's any friction. If there is a little bit of friction, you've likely banged the bearing on too much or too little. So check the spacing and see if you can adjust that slightly. Next step, as you guys all would guess, is zip ties. So let's take the zip tie, chuck it through. Same with the other side. Oops. Put it through like that. Perfect. Now we can work on attaching these to the outer tube. Let's grab this piece again and grab some jam nuts, and we'll press them, same as before, into this nut holder. Now, once we've done that, same deal as before. We're gonna push it into our tube as such. And once again, use our middle tube to separate the nut holders. And as you can see, that should be lining our nuts up in the right spot. Grab our screw, Now once we've done that, we can do the same thing as before, pull the tube out and should be able to gently squeeze it and pop it out like that. So same thing with the other side, we just got to flip it over and chuck more nuts in there. Just like that. Same thing as before, we should be able to squeeze it in, press the tube up, and as you can see, that lines the nuts up pretty well. Let's chuck our screws in again. It does help if you apply some downforce as well, but same as before, we'll pop this out and save it for later. So now we've got the same situation as before, we just need to put the main bearings on. There's quite a lot of parts involved in this sub-assembly, and the reason for this is that all box tube kits actually come with 4 sets of V-bearings. So 2 sets of V-bearings on this side and another set on this side. And that's so that if a team wants to incorporate counterspringing into their design, they don't have to go out and buy additional V-bearings, reprint stuff. It all comes included on your first assembly. So we're gonna make 2 identical assemblies here and here, and let's get into it. Same thing as before, we're gonna take these pieces and we're gonna press fit these 6x12x4 main bearings, I like to call them, onto the printed parts. And it should be a relatively tight fit, as you can see here. Just like that. And again, chuck our spacers on the outside. Just like that. Same as before, we're gonna need some shims. So go in a nut bag and have a look for some shims. Now in your bag, you'll find more shims than you need, and that's because we've included spares in case you lose any, or just in case you need a few more. We're gonna try and place the shims on our bearings like that. Place our bearing shield on them. Flip them around. And with some luck, place another shim between them. Using the good old Allen key trick, we're gonna chuck an Allen key right through that assembly. Try and make sure everything is lined up. So in this case, one of my shims needs to go down a little bit. But there we go, worked it out. Got to do that 4 times, but we'll do just one more for now because, like I said, they're identical assemblies. So hopefully this one's a bit quicker. Let's chuck it onto our Allen key again, like that. And now we have 2 bearings, 2 V bearings with their bearing shields and shims attached. I'm going to use another Allen key, good thing we have 2, and sort of build this as a one assembly. Chuck my assembly on, chuck this middle printed part on, and one more assembly, like that. And lastly, followed by one of these. Same thing as before, there are little grooves that should line up, as you can see here with the V-bearing shields. So just spin them until you get them all nice and lined up. There you go. Same thing as before, loosening the screws just a tiny bit will make it a lot easier to fit your main bearings onto your box tube. But ensure these are all lined up, and it shouldn't be too difficult to press your insert on. Same as before, I like to remove the Allen key and slide it into place like this. Might have gone too far that time. And slide our final 50mm screw all the way through. This time it might need convincing with an Allen key, just because there's quite a bit more stuff in this one assembly. But it should slide in relatively easily, as you can see. And make sure it's lined up at the other end. This time it is, great. I can screw all the way in, chuck an M3 lock nut on. Just like this. And we won't tighten it yet. Great, now let's do the same thing for the other side. Try and line it up best you can, and that time it slid in a lot easier. Still needs a little bit of convincing at the end. But nearly there. And we should see it come through. Once again, we'll chuck an M3 lock nut on. Now, as you can see, we've got a nearly completed kit. However, there's still a bit of adjustment we can do on this final stage. So as you can see, there's a little bit of slack between these side bearings. That's because we haven't tightened these screws. And importantly, we can adjust the amount of slack there is, hence the rigidity of the system, by tightening or loosening these screws. We're going to do just that and demonstrate how you can adjust your box tube system. So let's tighten them on up. Flip it around to the other side. Tighten them on up, and you should be able to see visually, if we're getting close, you should be able to see the tension changing as I loosen or tighten these screws a little bit. And now, as you can see, there is zero wobble, not even a little bit, on these side bearings. They're both engaged when I go in and out. And at full length, there is zero wobble or play at all, with still a relatively low friction system. And this is the sort of tuning that you have to do with this box slide kit. This includes, tuning with hole tolerances a little bit. Same with the bottom inserts, tuning with tightening or loosening screws. Sort of seeing what gives to make your system perfect. But this should be a good demonstration of the amount of wobble that is appropriate. As you can see here, one of our nuts has fallen out, and I think this is the perfect opportunity to show you guys a neat little trick in case you ever lose any of your nuts here. So, it's not super easy, but hopefully in this demonstration you'll see that it's doable, is that you can actually slot in a nut from the side. And I like to use a zip tie. Thankfully we have a few cut zip ties around here. Chuck the nut in and sort of guide it in like that until it's roughly aligned. Take our Allen key, start screwing until it's nut engagement, and as you can see, we have engaged our nut successfully, and we can now tighten it as per usual. nuts in there, nice and easy. Access holes are at the top on both sides, as you can see. And that's it, guys. So now we have a fully assembled box tube, high rigidity, low friction, low weight, and very compact. I'll see you next in our stringing guide.